what we've heard today is a familiar line, and it's important to unpick the budget myths perpetrated in this chamber. The Treasurer wants you to believe that running a deficit is the worst thing a government can do, but it's not true when the difference between spending more money and not is a hospital that functions and doesn't. Debt is not the most important consideration. The government's priorities are. The Treasurer would have Territorians believe that debt itself is the central problem facing the Territory, but that framing is misleading. As we've just heard, every government operates with some level of debt. That's not unusual. It's how our modern finance system, public finance system works. Governments build infrastructure that lasts decades. They invest in hospitals, in schools, in roads and housing that serve multiple generations. Borrowing to fund these long-term assets is normal practice across the world and across Australia. So the real question is not whether a government has debt. The real question is what that borrowing is used for and whether it improves the lives and the productivity of the people who pay for it. Focusing only on the headline debt figure becomes a distraction from the more important conversation about priorities. Governments are here to look after people, to maintain essential services and to make decisions about the priorities of the public. And when we have a government who refuses to collect more revenue from their multinational offshore gas company friends, who we currently get $0 tax from, in fact, we pay for them to be here through subsidies, revenue that could shorten wait lists at RDH, be used for public housing, for specialists, revenue that could pave some of the 75% of our roads that are unsealed, that could address public safety in sustainable ways, that could create more opportunities for young people who actually want to stay in the Territory. Madam Speaker, debt is not the problem here. It's what the government decides is a priority to spend money on. And you'll note I'm not talking about major projects here. We need essential services before major projects, not the other way around. My experience on the Shiplift inquiry solidified that for me. So that's what we need to remember. Budgets are about choices. So next time you hear the Treasurer say the reason we can't have nice things is because of debt, remember that the government chooses what is important to spend our limited pot of money on. Debt, operating deficit, borrowing, none of this forces the government to subsidise the fossil fuel industry and not the hospital. That's a choice made on your behalf. When we have an economy that measures success through the well-being of multinational companies and big industry rather than the well-being of making the Territory what it is, then we have a problem. If the economy is supposedly growing, that means what's called gross state product is growing, yet Territorians are more stressed, tell us they feel more unsafe and are more unable to afford basic essentials with inequality growing, then we're measuring the wrong things and we're rewarding the wrong priorities. I'll say that again. If the economy is supposedly growing, yet Territorians are unable to afford basic essentials, then we're measuring the wrong things. Gross state product is not a useful measure for economic well-being. The Minister has given us the government's view of the economy. What he says is growth, certainty and security. But what the Treasurer can't explain is why Territorians are still struggling even when the economy is supposedly growing and where all our needs-based funding is actually going. The Northern Territory gets almost 80% of our funding from the federal government, including 5 times the rate of GST funding compared to most other states and territories. And we get that to address our complex needs and remoteness. But when I asked the Treasurer how that needs-based funding is being tracked to make sure that it is actually addressing the need that it was intended to, the answer I got was, we don't track that. We don't track that? Madam Speaker, here is yet another issue worth talking about more than debt. Where is all the money that's meant to address that need going? So for Territorians who are sick of hearing budgets and economic plans that differ only in the margins, whoever's in power, I'm here to remind you that we don't have to settle for tinkering around the edges. We can create a budget that fundamentally improves Territorians' lives. I think we can have an alternative vision, a wellbeing economy, an economy that actually puts the needs of Territorians first, that invests early to save later, and refuses to funnel public money into the pockets of multinationals while families struggle to meet basic costs. Because the truth is this, when people thrive, the economy thrives, and when people are struggling to survive, no spreadsheet can claim success. So, Madam Speaker, a wellbeing economy starts with a simple shift that the purpose of a budget is to meet the basic needs of Territorians, not the needs of corporate boardrooms in Sydney, Delhi or Tokyo. We could have a people's budget here, one that invests firstly in health, mental health, domestic violence prevention, frontline services, safe housing, homelessness services, renewable energy, local jobs, roads and community infrastructure that actually meet the needs of the people here in the Territory. These are investments that represent short-term costs but significant savings in the long term. They reduce hospital admissions, they reduce crime, they reduce homelessness, they reduce youth detention and they reduce long-term government spending. So investing early is not just compassionate, it's economically responsible. Right now, too much of our budget is built on reaction rather than prevention and on subsidies for big corporations instead of support for just normal, everyday people. That's not a strategy, that's committing to an ongoing cycle of crisis. Madam Speaker, once again, this debate in this chamber is focused around blame across the chamber from party to party and focusing on the past. I think we need to focus on the future. I believe that we can build a budget for the Territory that's actually based around people's needs, a budget that says we need to put people first. Thank you, Madam Speaker.